Welcome to the Creating with Beauty podcast, where God's love and beauty flow through our hearts and hands with peace and intention. Here you'll find honest conversations, inspiring stories, and gentle invitations to create with the beauty and wonder already in your life. Beauty is both a gift and an invitation, leading us down a sacred path with Jesus.
I'm doing it for myself. What do I need to do to be brave and bold in life? When I do that, and I share about that in whatever way I do, and I let people know, like, hey, it's scary as heck, but come on, you can do it.
Welcome, everyone, to the Creating with Beauty podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Stephanie Lee, and I'm so honored and thankful to have her on as a guest today. She has the most beautiful way of creating, the most beautiful way of sharing stories and authenticity, and she has a great way of encouraging artists and makers and everybody to just embrace their creativity in whatever fashion that may be. And so I'm really excited to talk with her today. Her artwork is absolutely beautiful and stunning, and I love how she uses encaustic medium. I myself love encaustic medium, and so it drew me to her in the beginning, and then to just learn more about her and her stories and just how she shares and sees the world. I'm excited to have her on today. So Stephanie, would you like to say hello?
Hello. Thank you for having me on. I really look forward to this conversation.
Oh, good. And can you tell us a little bit about where you live? And
Yes. So I live in Southern Oregon, which is, it's pretty rural where I live, but access to a lot of beautiful things. We can go 2 hours in any direction and either be in the redwoods, at the ocean, or in the high desert. So we really love it, geographically speaking. We love it here. I've been with my husband for 30 years. We have 5 kids between us and 10 grandkids and various animals that changes with the seasons of life. So yeah, so that's kind of the nutshell snapshot of my life today. I spend as much of my time as possible outside. I work on my land a lot. I love growing things. I call it dirt medicine. It's like it's such a healing and grounding hobby. It's got a lot of drudgery to it, but it's worth it in all ways. So that's what I spend a lot of my time doing when I'm not in the studio creating. So that's the snapshot.
nice. I know you started sharing, at least I started seeing more of your gardening, I think maybe last year or the year before. And I always love your videos of what you share that you're growing and the tips that you share. And yeah, I went on this whole tomato thing last year, inspired by your tomatoes
support that.
The year before. And oh my gosh, we had these heirloom tomatoes. I absolutely loved them. And I was making like tomato soup and all this stuff. And I became allergic to tomatoes.
Oh no.
I'm like, what in the world? It's a cool trick.
It's not that uncommon, honestly. The nightshade family, some people are really sensitive to it, and I don't know what I will do if that ever happens to me. So
no, it's not going to.
Gorge myself in the meantime.
Right?
Yeah, tomatoes are one of my absolute favorites.
Yes, mine too. My husband, we had the grape tomatoes, and he would just go out there and just eat them by the handfuls. And I think he ended up counting. Like, we had over like 1,000 grape tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
So, he enjoyed them greatly.
It doesn't take very many plants to be in overabundance of tomatoes.
Right. Yeah. Yes. So I do love that about your creativity, is that you have it in just all the different layers of your life. You have your gardening. I know you have journaling. I know you have the art that you make, with your paintings and encaustics and everything like that. And so have you always been creative, or is this something that came on later in life?
Well, that's such a interesting question just in generally, because I think that the question of have you always been creative is going to vary depending on how someone defines creative, So for me, that definition includes like really being curious, wanting to figure things out, having some sort of idea of something that doesn't exist yet, and then pursuing making it into existence. Like, the act of like, I have this idea, I wonder if I could make it real. And I think being a creative person it might mean you're an artist, it might not mean you're an artist, you know? So I think at that fundamental level, I came into the world creative, which
Mhm.
means I came into the world curious. I came into the world wanting to see if I could make something come into being that didn't exist before. Wanting to figure out how things work, if things will go together, you know, and that can look like a lot of different things for people. So I've definitely always had that creative bent in that context. In terms of being a professional artist, to me that's like a tangential aspect of my creativity because whether I'm a professional artist or not, I'm never not going to be a creative person because that's just who I am, and I think that's true for a
Yeah.
lot of people.
Yeah.
But I've been a professional artist for going on 20 years.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's, you know, and that was an unexpected, unplanned path. I didn't know I didn't know that was a thing people could do as a kid. Like, I mean, I knew there were artists out there that made paintings. I didn't know that there were people who were making a living doing that, or even like making pocket money, like you know, being
Right.
able to support their buying their materials, like not even like at every level of generating any sort of income from it. And so it wasn't anything I dreamed of doing or pursued doing. It started out as you know, making things for myself and then not necessarily running out of room, but not wanting all those things to pile up, you know, or making something and then I'm tired of it in 6 months, but it's still awesome. What do I do with it, you know? And so it started initially as having like a booth in an artisan crafters type store, you know, and that's where I was like, oh, people are actually happy, like so happy to give me money for the fruits of my creative
Mm.
curiosity here, you know, and it just that I was blissfully naive. I didn't yet know the, you know, the perils of the artist's journey and all of the self-doubt that comes. So I just made whatever sounded fun to make. And so my curiosity started going down paths that have led me here, you know, and so that's kind of the two aspects of my creative journey. There's just me as a creative human, and then there's me as an artist who uses my creativity to create things that other people acquire from me in some way.
Okay. When you were back at that artist booth, what did you have in there?
A lot of like refinished furniture.
Nice.
I love sewing, and so there were like, you know, I might buy a couple of different shirts and like alter them together, you know, a lot of sewing stuff, a lot of painted furniture, a lot of vintagey finds that I then upcycled in some way to make them useful. So just all sorts of stuff like that. When the first sort of things that I made that are the closest to what I make now is when I would start to gather old photos and alter them in some way, you
Hmm.
know, add little bow ties or something like that. So that was kind of the first iterations of my two-dimensional art, you know, is that route. And I was there for a few years. My youngest was still in diapers, so it was a really um, sweet way to feel like I was doing more than just changing diapers and chasing babies all the time. I was able to have an outlet for my own creative pursuits, and it was on my own timeline, and there's no such thing as deadlines. You know, it was just do what I can when I can, and it was really perfect for that season of life.
That's wonderful. I know
Yeah.
you mentioned using older
Hmm.
photos and putting them in 2D work, and there was one post that you did well, it might have been a year or two ago actually. I think it was around your birthday, and you posted a picture of you as a little girl. And you
Mm-hmm.
had done, I don't remember exactly what you did with it because I haven't seen it in a while, but then it was the words that you put with that, like the meaning and the reflection that you put with that and the little girl. And maybe you etched some flowers by her or something like that.
I had a big like flower, not even a crown, but
Yes,
just like this
yes,
huge bouquet of flowers on my head. Yeah, that
yes.
was a fun little playful playful way to kind of revisit and reconnect with that version of me. I remember I was standing in front of my dad's truck in a swimsuit that was sagging off my rear end. I was like 5 years old. I probably had sticky fingers from something, who knows, but it was such that image of all the images of me when I was younger, that one feels the most like who I still feel like I am in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Minus the only way it could be even more so is if I was laughing so hard that, you could see my tonsils. But there's this, I love humor. I love laughing, but I think more than that, I'm very contemplative. And there's sort of this contemplative look on my face at that time, just kind of observing, adding things up around me and like, what am I going to do with this that I'm seeing? And I think we were at a creek or something and I just, been splashing around the water. So those kinds of images, the ones like I'm not particularly drawn to studio images, like studio portraiture, even beautiful vintage or antique ones. They're lovely in their way, but I'm drawn to the ones that were taken of someone in their everyday life. I just did a piece of art with a woman. She's in a dress, like a knee-length dress. It's probably the 30s. She's pushing one of those rotating lawnmowers, like with all her might. And it's like somebody from across the lawn thought, with precious film, right? This wasn't like now where we just take pictures of anything. Somebody saw this woman mowing and said, I want to capture this moment. Yeah. And I don't know if she was aware of it or not, but it was like, those are my favorite kinds of images of people living their life, especially knowing how precious the ability to capture that in film would have been for most people back then.
Right.
And so I love, still to this day, those are some of my favorite components to incorporate into art or to work with in art. Even if they're like missing part of it, even if the exposure like washed out half the person, or like it's not even so much that like the less perfect, the cooler. It's more like the less perfect, the more real it feels. Right. And that's what I like. I like grainy pictures, bad exposure, somebody's half cut off the edge. I love working with that because that just feels so real life,
Right. Very genuine. Yes.
Very, yeah. And I just feel so grateful for whoever, all those pictures that somebody said, I'm going to capture this, even though it's not studio portraiture. I'm just like, bless those people, because we have some really incredible images of just everyday people now because of that.
Right. And a time that's gone, bygone era, and just, right. How many people today would you see mowing a lawn in a dress?
Yeah. Let alone with a mower that has no motor,
Right.
Yep.
That's wonderful. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I do love your incorporation of the vintage photos. But that one of you as a little girl, I think it was just also to the story behind it and whatever you wrote with it was really deeply moving to me. I wanted to go find little girl pictures of myself. I don't have many at all, and like do the same thing. Like you totally, I haven't done it yet, but maybe I will now. But it was very inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was such a sweet, such a sweet reflection. So yeah, and I think too it was reflective of something with your dad at the time too. So that was precious. And so that will bring me to my next question for you. In what ways does your creativity connect to your roots or your family or your culture or place?
Yeah. This is an ongoing journey, right? Like, because at 40, I'm almost 49. At 49 years old, I'm discovering my place in my family in new ways that I didn't know at 20. Yeah. So that process of discovery for me, and not just discovery, but also like how do I want to show up in my family is super important to me. I'm really connected. I have a large extended family. We have reunions every other year. Like it is something I can't not have as part of my being, my history, my development, who I've become. Funny story. I think it's funny. I don't know if anyone else will. So I was adopted at 9 days old. My parents had been to a family reunion for my mom's side of the family, and then they were going to be home for a couple of days before going to a family reunion on my dad's side of the family, which is the side that we have these reunions every 2 years. And they didn't know I existed yet. They were just on a list, right? And I wasn't even they weren't even the next in line to be chosen to be my parents, but because I was born 4 inches long, they assumed I was going to be incredibly tall, which I'm not short at 5'9", but I'm not the 6'1" or 2" that they predicted I would be.
Wow.
And so they went through their list of parents and they stopped a few families in until they got to my dad, who was 6'4", and said, that's probably who she needs to go with. They didn't want me being the tall person, I guess, in the family, taller than my parents. And so they got a phone call, picked me up. They had to go north to this reunion, and I was about halfway there. And so they literally left their house with nothing, no baby supplies, and bought things on the way. Stopped at my mom's sister's house and picked up some hand-me-down baby clothes, picked me up. And my first night as a new member of this family was spent at a family reunion. So I kind of like, with my cousins, and we'll joke around about like who loves reunions more, and I'm like, well, just so you know, my very first night in this family, it was at a reunion, so like I have loved them the longest out of all of us. So but what's been interesting too is within my extended family and even my immediate family, there's nobody that's an artist, per se. There's nobody. I bet you there are more artists than we know who just haven't developed any skills around that. They've been busy doing other things in life. I do have one cousin who I remember young. She did beautiful drawings and renderings of things. But I didn't have any sort of examples of that. But all of my family, everybody in my family, especially my parents, were very much like, what are you interested in? Let's go figure out how you can do that, kind of a thing. And so even though at the time when I was young, I wasn't interested in being an artist, I was going to be a veterinarian or private investigator, or I had all these and then in high school I was going to be a botanist. I had all these other interests. The spirit of really honoring and making a lot of space for curiosity is something that feels like the most connection I have. So it's not like I can say like, oh, my mother was an artist and I learned how to paint from her, but the connection in family is very much like, figure out who you are and pursue it and celebrate it, and how can we help you even if we don't get it, that kind of a thing. And also there's I've been kind of in this faith journey, exploring what it looks like to be in a big family, huge family, where an outsider might look in and go, there's a lot of homogenization here. All the women kind of have the same mannerisms or temperaments or personalities, and that's not the case. But to an outsider, it could look like, oh, they're all kind of the same, and and because we have lots of things in common, right? Certain values and ways of being and family dynamics. So, but this idea of like, what does it look like to be a gift to my family?
Oh.
And in the way that all of my other people are gifts to me as in the family. And the people that I mean, they're all gifts in beautiful ways. I have an uncle who says he can't carry a tune in a bucket, right? But he's like, but I'll hold all the babies while all the other adults are up singing. And he's the resident baby holder, and he can soothe the most upset baby. Like, he is such a gift in that way to our family. But I've over the years, I felt like it was hard to figure out. Now I understand, like, oh, my gift to the family is to be exactly who I am, not to be exactly like they are. It's and I love doing that. I love being who I am, not to like show them or prove them, but to just exist as myself, so that when we are together, whatever good can come from that as a group, it's like I'm familiar with who I am. I can contribute who I am in some way. And so So my creative pursuits connect me to my family in the sense that I recognize the value of pursuing whatever uniqueness I have that's different from my family or my roots without necessarily needing to be different. Like the uniqueness is just going to be what it is, but I don't need to like adopt a black sheep mentality or anything like that. It's like, no, we all have something unique and in our families and our neighborhoods and our whatever to offer. And one of the biggest gifts we can give, I think, is to cultivate that authenticity. And I remember once someone telling me they were telling me about me as if they knew me, which is one of my pet peeves. like like don't tell me who you think I am. You don't even know me. But they said something like, "Oh, you just can't be put in a box. You refuse to be put in a box. You just want to be unique." And it really rubbed me the wrong way. But I understood why they were saying that from whatever they were seeing. And because it bothered me so much, I thought there's some work here for me to do. I need to understand what this is about. And I realized with some time and lots of journaling, I wasn't striving to be unique. I was striving to be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that meant I was unique in the context of other people. But sometimes it meant I was doing exactly what somebody else was doing. And I think the authenticity matters the most when it looks like what everybody else is doing, but it's really you. Because
Yeah.
there's such a cacophony of voices telling you that your authenticity is always going to look different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you lay it all out on the table, yes, there's no way it can't be different, right? There's no way it's going to be the same as everybody. But to outside observers who don't know all the ins and outs of you, it might look like you're just the same as somebody else. And I think the biggest work within your own self is to know that that's fine if you're authentically being yourself. So, I kind of went off on a little tangent there, but I think that work of honoring who I really am and what really lights me up and what I'm really curious about, there's there's no way I can do that without considering myself in the context of who my models were growing up,
Mm-hmm.
who who overcame what so that I could even do this, all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, I have I our family is really big in family history. I remember hearing a podcast recently where someone said, ask most people who their grandparents are and they can tell you their names, but you say their great grandparents and they can't. And I was like, I can,
Mm-hmm.
because it's been such a big part of our family. But I'm going to be that person somebody names in 3 or 4 generations. What am I contributing?
Right.
So I want to be the one that when they tell stories, they say, yeah, uh, she was she did her own thing. Um, she honored who she was. She loved really well when we showed up. Those are the kinds of things that I want to be. And so that's like the right now. So much of connecting with my roots is also saying, how do I want to author my connection to my roots going forward, not just back.
Mm-hmm. Right. You do that so amazingly, just from the outside looking in with the posts that you share, the things that you share, your stories, your family, things that you're walking through, all of that. You just have it's just such a genuine way of inviting us into that world of yours that you do live and the parts that you do share. And it's not that you do it. I'm kind of talking like I know you. No, I'm just someone from outside, like, right? But no, it's just my observation of it is like from the
Mhm.
outside looking in with what you share. It's so important to you. Your family is so important to you, and
Mhm.
also helping other people tap into that authenticity for themselves. And I love how you shared that you can still be authentic to yourself and have it look like somebody else's work, but it's still yours, and that's really what counts.
Mm-hmm.
is that initial insight and feeling to it. And but yes, the way you share your family and your stories, it's so beautiful and so moving. And I thank you
Thank
for that.
you.
It's very inspiring and encouraging.
Mm.
So that is
Mm.
also why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because you're one of the artists I know that from the outside that does that it like kind of invites us into a little bit more, and it just allows a deeper reflection in
Mm.
your work, but then also within ourselves. You're inspiring other artists to be genuine, and so I appreciate you for that, because
Mm.
if we all were to walk around being genuine, think about how much more beautiful things could be, just like in the spirit that you're doing it, in the loving and the kindness, and how can I be a gift and help people and encourage people and love people well, and you do it through your art too. So
Mm.
anyways,
Thank you.
thank you for that. I appreciate that. Let's talk about some of your mediums now. I mean, I kind of
Okay.
have, but let's you talk about them.
Okay, let's
So
do
what
it.
mediums do you like to create with now?
Well, I was pondering this question because it's like, how could I pick just one? Which of course you're not
No.
asking me to pick just one. But for me, it's more not so much about the specifics of the mediums, but how something feels. So
Mm.
right now, I'm really into crinkly, so like papers that have been wet and then dried, um, torn, tattered, vintagey, like old. Papers that get kind of brittle because they're, from the 40s or something. I really love that feeling of kind of crinkly brittle. So papers are really fulfilling that for me right now. I love water. I was just thinking like water is one of my favorites because it affects every medium. I mean, like you put it on paper and it changes the paper. You put it with paint and it changes the paint. You let it air dry and it's different than if you dry paper with an iron that's been wet. So I love the way water changes things. Um, and also, I think ultimately, like right now, I'm really into anything thick and creamy. So I have a what I call my texture medium that I use. It's a
Mm.
combination of plaster and white gesso, plaster of Paris and white gesso. And I am forever in love with that. I love the versatility of it. I love the way it sounds when I'm smearing it. It's got that like fluffed frosting sound. It can be thick and creamy. It can be smooth and self-leveling. Like I can modify it a lot, but I love that when I apply it in the thickness that I like, it holds, like I apply it and it holds the shape that I applied it on. So I don't love a lot of, I talk about this in my classes and it feels a little tricky to explain just with words, but I don't love a lot of physical texture in my work,
Mhm.
like really highs and real lows, but I love a lot of visual texture. And it turns out that it takes very little physical texture to make a lot of visual texture. Like think about two layers of paper, like if you overlap two layers of paper, physically there's hardly any difference between those. But visually there's a big difference between that texture, those two different layers of paper. You can really see the difference between the two where they overlap. And so the plaster gesso allows me to create a lot of visual texture. It also allows me to create a lot of physical texture, but I just don't usually use it that way. Um, and then like oil sticks that are just thick and creamy. The Sharpie Mean Streak that you can get at a home improvement store is one of my absolute favorite mediums. It's just this basically a white oil stick. It's like, think about drawing with lipstick on a mirror. It's got that thick, creamy drag to it. I love it.
Wow.
And then also paint that's like half dehydrated. So like when I buy house paint and I don't put the lids on all the way, over time it starts to kind of dry out. And so it becomes very thick and almost like salve or something, it's just got this thick,
Mhm.
creamy feel. So those are what really give me the fizz when I'm working with them right now. Like and they have for a long time. I don't see that changing anytime soon. Maybe the way I combine them changes over time, but just that feeling of like thick, creamy, crinkly, that I love that. That's where I'm at with my mediums.
I have to thank you for plaster gesso.
Yeah? You
Oh
use
my
it?
gosh. Oh my gosh. I took one of your
Fun.
classes years ago. It might have even been one of the free classes that you did. You've used it
Mm-hmm.
in almost all of your classes that I've taken, but that initial one when you did that, and I absolutely love that stuff. It is the best thing ever. It has so much versatility, right? But it's
Yeah.
just there's
Yeah.
something about it that just it invites so much more. Like, what can I do
Yeah.
with this now? What can I add to this?
Yeah.
What can, yeah,
Yep.
absolutely love it. And on
I
wood,
know. I love it
and
too.
putting
Yes.
it on wood panels.
Yeah. Well, it ultimately was, besides it being fun to work with, it was a huge, huge, huge blessing because it answered, like when I teach my classes and someone says like, "Hey, can I do this?" I hate saying no. Like I hate saying no
Mhm.
because it means I haven't explored it enough yet. there's there's often like, well, if you do this, this is what will happen, and maybe they decide they don't want that end result, and so they decide for themselves, no, I'm not going to put that together. But there was very few times where I actually had to say no, and one of those, it was when I was working with plaster of Paris with water. And people would say, "Oh, can I use this on like flexible, like fabric or paper?" And I kind of had to say no, and I hated that. I'd be like, "Well, you can put it on there, but it's going to crack and break and fall off," which to me is essentially not, usually people don't want to put something on just for it to fall off. And so for me, it was like, I really want to be able to say yes to people when they
Mhm.
say, can I use this new to me yummy thing and apply it to the stuff I already love, which is like maybe book arts or textile arts or something. I really wanted to come up with a yes. And the gesso instead of water is the yes. That's what allows it to be flexible. That's what
Mhm.
allows it to be adhesive because plaster grabs to things, but it doesn't stick. And so, it allows it to be more like adhesive, like gesso is. And so that to me was just like such like a blessing to discover that combination because I don't have any no's with it yet. Like I haven't found anything it doesn't work on, which I love
Right.
that because
Yeah.
doors are open, doors are
Yeah.
wide open for going into the next thing. You might hit a wall down the road doing something I haven't done yet with it, but that's not going to be the limiting factor, you know.
Right. Right. And what I love too about just in our conversation and everything you're sharing is that it goes back to that curiosity that your
Mm-hmm.
parents instilled in you. And it seems to be like it's in everything that you do. What about this? What about that? It's just so how fun to be you. like I would
Yeah.
just like to always be discovering these new things and looking for them and what about this and what about that, and yeah, it's just so
You
cool
know,
to
it's
see.
funny. I don't mean to like go backwards, but you mentioned that my parents instilled that curiosity in me, and that feels like something I don't think you realize how meaningful that is because that has been
Oh.
on my mind so much lately because what happened recently is I the two daughters that came out of my body. My oldest is 28. I have three stepkids that are older. So my oldest just turned did she just turn 28 or 29? 20. Anyway, she's too old. And and somebody was talking to me about how awesome she is. And I was like, I know, she's amazing. I was like in total agreement, as if I wasn't her mother, right?
Yeah.
And because it's true, she's amazing. And they're like, well, that just, is a testament to you and your husband. And whenever someone has said that to me, I receive it as a really lovely compliment that it is, but it also kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit because I'm like, no, this girl survived me as a kid. Like I was afraid of my own shadow. I
Mm.
was worried about the world. Like I was not, as a young mother, I was not the confident, courageous person I am now, more so. I wasn't I did so many things wrong with her as a mom. And which I think all parents are going to have a list they
Mhm.
can come up with, right?
Right.
Same with my other daughter, two daughters, and they could tell you a lot more, I'm sure, than even I'm aware of. And I've been thinking about that. I'm like, well, what is that? Like, okay, my husband and I have been happily married their whole lives. I think that's a huge component to
Mhm.
them feeling safe in the world, feeling like that home is a place of safety and respite and love and comfort. But there are lots of happily married people who have kids that really struggle. So that's not it. That's a piece of it, but that's not it. Long story short, what I am toying with, this is currently in the hopper of experimentation, is people come into the world as beautiful and as amazing as they are. And we can
Mhm.
either allow that as parents and encourage it, or we
Yeah.
can squelch it. I don't think we create it.
Mhm.
This is what I'm currently experimenting with. So my daughter came into the world who she was, and despite all my mistakes, I didn't squelch it. I didn't ruin it.
Mhm.
And in many ways, thank goodness, I encouraged it and allowed it. But she is who she is. She came into the world who she is. She came in divinely designed, independent of any impact from me until time passed.
Mhm.
And so when I think about how you're saying that my parents instilled that creativity in me, I, I, my, I don't, I don't know that they did because they're not the same kind of curious people, but they never ever squelched it.
Yeah.
I think there was a big part of me that they're like, I do not get her. But they're like, you know, who am I to get in the way of who she's becoming? And so I think that's been to me, that's my biggest um um and they're both passed on now, but they both would say like, "Oh, I don't know how you're like this. Don't give me any credit." Like
Yeah.
they were just so aware of their own, like I didn't do this. You came into the world this way, girl. I
Mhm.
just knew to stay out of your way and buy you the supplies you needed, kind of a thing. And super encouraging, right? But
Right.
I think their biggest gift was they allowed me to be curious
Mhm.
which was such a gift because they weren't that same level of curious. If they were, it would have been easy for them. They're like, oh yeah, let's be curious together. But they were in their own ways, but in a different way. And so for them to encourage and allow my increase, like my bigger level of curiosity than what they had, to me, that's such, like, I just want to honor them for that because it would have been so much easier. And in some ways, my mom especially kind of tried to mold me into a certain type of child, but for the most part, just kind of let me be who I was and said, okay, go girl, and encouraged that, supported
Mhm.
that, even though it wasn't their nature in the same way. So, just kind of a tangential thought there that I think can be really valuable, especially for women in midlife who are trying to understand their value, their unique offerings and gifts,
Mhm.
and trying to make sense of why they exist, what they're supposed to do with them. And, at 48, I feel like, the question of like, when did you, um, any sort of question that's along the lines of like, when did you first notice that you were a creative person or something? I'm like, well, that's happening over and over every few years for me.
Yeah.
I'm discovering a new level of my creativity or a new way it wants to be expressed. And to let it be okay that at 40, almost 49, I'm still figuring out new aspects of my creativity. That's really, really liberating.
Mhm.
And, if there's any sort of, I mean, you talked about how I'm encouraging to other artists and I want my presence and my work to be that, but I don't create it to do that.
Right.
Except in that I'm doing it for myself. What do I need to do to be brave and bold in life? When I do that and I share about that in whatever way I do, and I let people know like, hey, it's scary as heck, but come on, you can do it. That's that's me. That's not me just encouraging people. That's me wanting to show people like, we're doing this together. You can do this. Look, I'm doing it. You can do it too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not interested in being an encourager from an outside, you know, I got it figured out sort of way. It's like I might only be a half a step ahead of somebody in the braveness, but that's enough to say, come on. it's safe a half a step ahead. You can do it, you know?
You have that
So,
voice. You have the voice to
mm,
say that.
thank you.
Yeah, you say that. And I'm a few years older than you. My oldest daughter just turned 30 in December.
Mm.
And so I will be 54 on Monday.
Happy
And
birthday.
thank you. But I'm with you in still, well, I mean, you have way more figured out. But like for
Okay.
myself as an artist,
Glad I have you fooled.
like you embrace it. You embrace it. You embrace it. And so
What's the alternative? You
exactly,
know?
not and then feeling
Resistance,
like, yeah,
resentment,
yeah,
frustration,
right.
feeling lost, feeling purposefulness.
Yes,
Like, what's the alternative? Just,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to
No, you're
interrupt
good.
you.
No, you're good. I totally agree with you. And so, like you said to women in the middle, basically, it's always evolving. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
we think I know, like we get to this age, why don't you have this all figured out yet?
Mm-hmm.
But do we ever have it all figured out yet, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
journey is actually figuring it out. Whatever it
Mm-hmm.
might, like you said, every couple of years, like it's something different. And so I find that for myself too a little bit, like I want to do all the things all the time,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
there's the genuine, let's go into this, like the genuine first thing that moved you. What was that for you? Like in your creativity, was there something that you were like, maybe you mentioned this when you were talking about your booth, I don't know, but was there something that you were like, wow, this is amazing and I want to do more of this? Was that like a moment where, so like for me, I'll give you an example. For me, it was photography. And it
Mm.
was after the passing of my dad, and I received a
Mm-hmm.
surprise life insurance check in the mail. I had no idea was coming, and it was a lot for him. It was
Mm-hmm.
amazing, but I took that money and I purchased my first DSLR. And
Mm.
so it's like for me, it's photography. I absolutely
Mm-hmm.
love taking the photos, and I see it as moments of beauty and connection with the Lord and just healing. So was there something like that for you in your creative journey where you felt like, wow, this is amazing and I need to listen to this?
There was a moment, and this feels really, really critical for me because I actually didn't pursue any art very soon after it, but it was a moment that shifted my mindset. And it was when I went to, so I was raised in Utah, and I went to my dad, I don't know why he took me. It's kind of bizarre to me that he thought this would be a fun daddy-daughter day. I love that we did it, but um, I think it was just he and I. I don't remember anybody else there with us, but it was this exhibition by an artist named James Christensen, who I would say he's since passed, but he I would say maybe kind of fantasy sort of style of paintings. You can
Okay.
look him up online. He would paint these they were very dark in color, like a giant hot air balloon, kind of steampunky, I guess you could say, with
Oh, cool.
all these things hanging on it and these creatures, and there's always like a fish, and they were so full of fantastical little Easter eggs, right? Like you could stand in front of one painting and just look at it for 20 minutes and not see it all. And he also had some kinetic work that was like these contraptions that moved that were really fascinating. But what the thing was this was a real guy that my dad knew.
Oh,
Like this was a real human that lived in some neighborhood that my dad could tell you the address. And I think maybe my dad did some work or talked to him about doing some work on his house. My dad was a carpenter. I can't remember how much my dad actually knew him. But it was like, oh, I'm looking at art created by a person that like my dad knows. And that's
mm,
that connection. It wasn't like I'm looking at a piece of art by Van Gogh, a guy that lived once upon a time. It was like this is a real person in the here and now doing this right now. All of these people in this gallery are here to observe and admire his work. There was no thing of like, oh, this is what I want to do with my life, but it was more just like, oh, that's a thing people are doing. They're
mm,
making art. Real people that shop at the Macy's down the street that we shop at, they're making art like this, like the Macy's where I grew up was a grocery store, not a department store, but so that brought the human element to it. The like, I wonder if I would ever do anything like that. Like it
Mm.
was kind of like, I wonder what else out there that I didn't know was possible for me, maybe could be possible for me.
Mm.
I still wasn't at that point yet interested in pursuing art as a profession. I liked my art classes in school, and I liked, submitting things for the art school art contest and that kind of thing. But that was such a pivotal moment for me to make the connection between art and a human, a real human that lives and breathes right now and is doing it, actively doing it right now. So that was like such a pivotal moment. But then another thing that was like kind of a big shift for me of like, oh, maybe I can do this, is I had gone and taken a class. Um, it was my first quote unquote like art retreat, and I felt so like such a fish out of water. Like this was a world so new to me. I had no idea, but it was such a fun class. It was perfect for me at the time. And I there was a woman in the class who was friends. She was a freelance writer for a magazine, and she said, "Hey, I love the work that you've created in this class. Can I write an article about it?" And I was super shocked and amazed and honored and flattered and all that stuff. I also felt a little weird, like, but I just did what the teacher said to do. Like, like, shouldn't you do a thing about the teacher? And she's like, oh, yes, it'll be about that too. And I now see that I had my own style, even though thought I was just doing what the teacher
Mm.
said. I had a unique style, as did everyone in the class. We each had our own style, right? But anyway, so she wrote an article about it, and a woman who hosted one of the largest art retreats at the time in the country read the article and reached out to me and said, hey, she didn't know I didn't know anything. She didn't know I was, she's just like, hey, I would love for you to come teach at our retreat. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not a real artist. I don't know what I'm doing. And I remember thinking, what have I got to lose? I'm going to try it. Now, I already knew from other experiences and organizations that I was a decent teacher. I've developed a lot since then. And if anyone listening has taken some of my classes, you may not agree with that because I haven't always been an amazing teacher, but overall, I've developed my skills as a teacher. I feel like that's something that comes naturally and easy for me, and I love it. And so that was kind of the beginning of like, whoa, this could really be a thing that I could do. And so I submitted classes. They all got accepted. I taught. They all filled, and I just never stopped until a few years ago and just dialed it way back. So I think it was that, it was in terms of actually like doing it myself, it was that moment of like, hey, will you come teach this? Going
Mhm.
and taking the class was fun, but then what? I was just going to go home and have that memory, maybe
Right,
tinker
right.
around a little bit more. So for someone to say, I want you to share your perspective and your reason and your design choices with other people, that was a big aha for me.
I agree. That recently happened with me. Somebody, Kim Pepper,
Mm,
asked me to teach on her creative network, and I don't know if confidence is the word, or the affirmation. I guess the affirmation is to, you could step into this and do more with
mm-hmm,
this,
mm-hmm.
means everything. I
Yeah.
think, I think I know for myself, you just kind of sit here, you're doing your thing, and then but when somebody else sees something in you that is there, but then they see it without you telling them,
Mm-hmm.
anything about it, that is so validating. And just, yeah, I feel like we all need that,
Yeah.
in the world, and creativity, and just, I see you and I see what you're capable of doing, and it's good, you
Yeah,
know?
and we even if we see it ourselves, we also see what we still aren't very good at that we want to get good at. We see our own little inner criticism, we see
Yeah.
our doubts, we see all that other stuff, and all of that can quickly overshadow the the only thing somebody else is seeing. And
Right.
somebody outside is just seeing what you're creating and the ease with which you create, it seems, or whatever.
Hmm.
That's all they're seeing. And that doesn't mean they don't have the full picture. It means that what they see is sufficient.
Yeah.
All of the rest of the self-doubt, that's just part of being a human. It doesn't mean that you've tricked anybody, you know?
Right. 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 So let's answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you have good answers on this because I've read some of them in the past. So, but so how
No
do you
pressure.
deal with the inner critic?
My answer has evolved over the years,
Okay.
and let's talk again in 5 years and see if I have a new answer. So when you say deal with the inner critic, generally people mean like quiet it, right? Like shut it down, ignore it, kick it out, whatever similar term. And
Don't let it ruin what basically don't let it ruin what the Lord has for you with creativity
yeah,
is where I'm coming
yeah,
from. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's a really beautiful way of saying it because I don't try to quiet the inner critic.
Yeah.
I meet it full frontal with logic.
Yeah.
And that took a long time to realize that for me was a really effective way to put it in its right size. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I recognize my inner critic as just part of being human. I don't
Yeah.
see for myself how to ever not have at least some little tinge of it, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just part of being human. Like it's also part of what like they talk about like a tree that's planted too close to water. It doesn't have to send down very deep roots, to survive. And so a windstorm comes and it can easily be knocked over because its root system isn't very deep. But if you plant a tree further away from water, bigger winds come and it's got that
Mm.
resilience. And of course, that's a very oversimplified example. But I just consider the inner critic um, as a challenge in my environment that if I face it with logic, gives me it helps me. It's a good thing. It gives me confidence and courage that I had to work to get because I
Mm-hmm.
had to go up against this inner critic. So for me, like an example of meeting it with logic almost all the time is the inner critic likes to, just generally speaking, it likes to give you these little subjective arguments that
Mm-hmm.
that aren't black and white. They're not based in fact. Like, oh, um, I don't know if you're cut out for this. And you have to just go, wait a second. Let's meet that with logic. Cut out for what? First of all,
Yeah.
what is this that you're talking about? And there's usually not, it's kind of like, oh, if you really have a conversation, there's enough subjectiveness and vagueness in what the inner critic is offering you that unless you meet it with like, wait a minute, what are we talking about? How will I know if I'm cut out for it? What does that even mean to be cut out for it? Like you start challenging it with really logical questions and it falls apart pretty quickly because you realize like okay, I'm sitting here today on a Thursday, you know, watercoloring in my sketchbook, and I'm sitting here going, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. Well, for what? For watercoloring on a Thursday? How hard is that? Anybody can do, like you start realizing the insanity of the argument
Yeah.
and how it's intentionally vague and intentionally subjective, in my opinion. That's the power of it, is that vagueness and that subjectivity, because it requires that you step up and create some clear definitions that it has to argue with and then it can't. Now, once you have those clear definitions, you have to flip and take responsibility for them. And a lot of people don't want to take responsibility for for quote unquote proving the inner critic wrong. They would rather, and this is such a weird thing to say, they would rather still feel like they're kind of trying to figure out the inner critic. It's uncomfortable, but it's safe. There's no confidence required, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
no boldness required. And so if the inner critic is telling me like, "Oh, I don't know, you're an imposter." It's like, "What? I literally just put this paint down. It
Yeah.
wasn't pretend. I'm an imposter of what? Who am I trying to pretend to be?" Like, it's like just meeting it with that logic. And then And then asking myself, this is to me the most valuable question. Who do I want to be in the face of this inner critic? How do I want to meet it? Who do I want to be in the face of it? It's like, do I want to be someone that's crippled by it, that's inhibited by it? Or do I want to be someone that looks and goes, yeah, I know that's maybe that's true. I don't know. Maybe I'm not cut out for this, but I'm going to do a lot of work to see if that's true. I'm not going
Right.
to decide it, I used to say I'm not going to decide it a year in. Well, I'm also not going to decide it 20 years in. I'm 20 years into this now. I'm not going to decide yet whether I'm cut out for this because I'm different than I was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. I'm evolving. So I have no idea how my evolution is going to go. Maybe I'll be more cut out for something, whatever that even means. Maybe I'll realize there's a different path I want to take. It's irrelevant. Right now, in this moment, yo, inner critic, you can hang out if you want, but just so you know, you're dumb.
Right.
You're speaking in vagueness. You're not
Yeah.
making any sense,
Not in truth.
you know? No,
Right? Not in
no.
truth. It's just right. I think it's just an inner dialogue to keep us from stepping into whatever there is for us.
Yeah,
And like you said though, it's constantly evolving.
yeah,
When you look at trying to do something new and maybe you see, a bunch of other artists or creatives doing something and it inspires you, and then you kind of compare yourself to that, well, I'm not as good as them. Like this whole but that doesn't matter. You're just starting, and you have
yeah,
so eloquently said and shared in our interview so far that that doesn't matter. It's what you do for you.
yeah.
It's like
And
you answer to yourself more than and
absolutely.
yeah.
And absolutely, like if I go and sit with people who have done something longer than me, it is not self-deprecation to say I'm not as good as them. It is if I say it with that spirit, but
Right.
it's also just a fact. Oh yeah,
Right.
I'm not as good as they are. But what does that really mean? I haven't done it as long as they have. I'm not as practiced.
And we don't
Like
need to do that.
none of that needs to be a bad thing. It can just be if you have to say to yourself, it can just be fact. It's not a tick against your worth or your value or your potential. And everything the inner critic has to offer, I look at it two ways. We can either we can exhaust ourselves, deplete ourselves trying to ignore it, fight it and shut it down, or we can look at everything the inner critic offers as an invitation to look what's underneath what it's offering us. And I call those moments, I think life is full of them right now, these holy invitations.
Mm.
Because if we're willing to do that introspective work of looking at something that's really prickly and sticky and gross and uncomfortable and saying, what is the invitation here?
Mm-hmm.
We may not have an answer immediately, but just being able to like hold that question and then move forward with that question like in our heart, little answers start coming in the process. Like, what's the invitation here? The invitation that this inner critic is offering on with a sharp tongue is for me to keep going and see what happens. It's to let myself create even when I feel like I'm not good at it. It's this being willing to do it, the idea of like feel the fear and do it anyway. Um I as much as I despise platitudes that I think are overused and often misused, that's a really good example of like let the inner critic exist and do your work anyway. Not with resentment for the inner critic. Absolutely not thinking that it will go away when you just assume it's never going to go away. It's just going to change form
Mm-hmm.
and show up. Let it like what is that Rumi poem like? It's the guest house. Let it in, and and do what your heart's calling you to do anyway. And
Yeah.
let it be okay if you're not as good as the person next to you or there's a difference between comparing ourselves and then determining our value as artists or humans based on our work to somebody else. There's another thing with comparing our work as an indication of where we want to improve our skills.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of those is about us innately as a person. The other one is just about how we want to grow and develop. And I don't think all comparison is bad. I think if we're comparing where we're at with something else we want to create, and then we assess it with what skills do I need to develop to get to that place, that's awesome comparison. That's like that's the whole artist journey is what else, what do I want to get better at doing here, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So again, I could ramble about that for
No.
forever, but
I heard somewhere, I read somewhere, and I liked this tip. Somebody said just give it a name. The inner critic.
mm,
Like not
hmm
today, whatever, Joni or whatever, I mean
yeah,
whatever name
yeah.
you come up with, and it just kind of puts it in its place. And yeah. So anyways, I thought that was interesting. I have used that.
Yeah.
Not today.
And what if you said to it like, "Yo, hey, let's say you named it Joni. Joni, what are you worried about here?
Yeah,
Tell
right?
me,
Yeah.
you just said some super mean things to
Yeah.
me. What are
And
you
it's
worried about? What
and
are
then
you afraid of?"
what you're saying too is that it's like this deep introspection that can move you forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having
Yep.
that conversation instead of not
Yeah.
today, also going, okay, well, what are you saying? And then it's not really true. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you. I knew you
hmm
would have a lot of insight into the inner critic. So I appreciate that.
Well, I haven't figured out a way to get rid of it. Maybe somebody along the way will. I've just learned, I mean, it's evolved over the
Yeah.
years. It tells
Yeah.
me different lies now, but at least I'm onto it, you know?
Exactly. I think that's key. All right, Stephanie, thank you so much for your time today and this wonderful interview. I can't wait to share it. And I will post all of your links and everything below the video and in the podcast description. So, where can people find you the easiest, though?
Well, I'm most active on Instagram usually, which is Stephanie Lee Maker, all one word on Instagram. But my website is stephanieleeart.com. That's where you can find my whole library of classes and, you know, work that I have available, that kind of stuff. But I'm most active on Instagram. And then again, my classes are on my website. So either
Great.
place is
Wonderful.
good.
All right. Thank you, dear friend. I'm so happy we got to connect here.
Thank you. Thank
All
you. It's
right.
been an awesome conversation. Good for me.
Good for me, too.
It's
All
super
right.
good for me.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye, everybody.